And when we talk about a life sciences strategy, it's very important that we engage not only the various stakeholders throughout the life sciences sector from the perspective of technologies and various verticals, but that we also engage the regions across the province. I think, as was discussed earlier in one of the panels, Ontario is a huge geography. And with the geographic diversity also comes diversity of clusters. Each of these clusters have their unique and individual strengths, and our ability to leverage those as part of an overarching strategy is going to be key to our success. So with that, please join me in welcoming Allan Odette.
Thanks, Jason. I'll borrow a couple of these notes to read some bios. So good afternoon, everyone. How was the morning? Good? Where are people from? How many Canadians are in the room? Other. How many people are all from biotech, life sciences? Any animal health? Any agriculture? 1, 2, 3, okay. So let me first say, Jason, thank you kindly for inviting me. How many members in this room are members of, or people in this room are members of Life Sciences Ontario? So the rest of you need to become members of Life Sciences Ontario, because if you want to continue to be successful in this province, you need to strengthen this group. I'm not going to deliver too many messages to you today other than the following. If you're waiting for government to reinvent your community or this sector, you're going to be waiting an awfully long time. And I don't mean to say anything untoward about government, but leadership to build this sector is going to come from each of you folks. So figuring out how you can step up and lead is what will make a difference. I was chatting with my old friend David Crane from the Star earlier about government, and typically politicians follow, they don't lead. And if you can generate enough critical mass here, they will follow you. If they see a winner, they will follow you. And I think that this sector, writ large, including agriculture, is a big winner. It was interesting listening to the speaker a little bit earlier. Things do not happen by accident, and I was reminded last night or the night before about Silicon Valley. Something I'm going to be talking an awful lot more about is the Toronto-Waterloo corridor. You know, if you think about Silicon Valley and San Francisco, it's almost the exact same distance between those two areas as it is between Toronto and Silicon Valley. And while I represent businesses all across this province, I think what we're trying to do is fundamentally strengthen the fabric of your sector, from Ottawa and Peterborough through Kitchener, London, and all points in between. I would like to, at the end of approximately 45 minutes, have advanced the conversation a little bit more, how we might be able to strengthen this sector based on some successes that we've had regionally. And we're going to hear from some great panelists from Mississauga, from Ottawa and London, and from Nanos research. And part of what we'd like to pull out of today is, in those areas, what has been working well and what might we do to be even more effective if. I can tell you that if we take the successes that they've had and figure out how to cross-pollinate them around the province, and more importantly, if we can figure out how to work collectively and collaboratively, I think you might have a chance to be successful. But if you can't create a bigger tent, if all this is inside baseball, I'm going to draw on some experiences I've had in the financial sector, manufacturing, whether it's autos, gas, other sectors where people are being successful. They're creating a big tent, and they're effectively telling government what enablers they need in place to continue to drive investment and employment numbers. So it really is a pleasure to be here today. Ontario is facing a lot of different challenges, and I think you guys are coming together at a really important juncture. And I know this has been going on for quite some time because I spent nearly 25 years working in this sector, and I've seen the discussions from patent protection all the way through trying to continue to develop this biotech cluster in Ontario. And I do applaud the leadership, Jason, that you and Paul Lucas bring to this. I know some days must feel like a bit of an uphill battle, but the reception and the reception you received at Queen's Park yesterday, I think underscores the importance. And if I leave you with no other message today, if you're not a member of this organization, become a member and strengthen it, because that will contribute to your own success in the future. So I'm not going to go through a lot of notes that Jason carefully prepared for me, because I'd like to go right into where we need to go. And part of that is going to be understanding where we currently are. So these are going to be in no order, and I apologize because I don't know each of you intimately. I'm going to start here with Justin. He's the Vice President of Operation and Startup Services at Tech Alliance. And this is a very important program with a team of advisors and analysts, entrepreneurs and residents who work in more than 200 tech companies. And I understand that this group is, at least in part, funded by the MARS program here?
Correct.
Okay, terrific. So we'll look forward to hearing from you and some of the experiences in London. My longtime friend of 30 years is Susan Amring. She's the Director of Economic Development from the city of Mississauga. We were chatting earlier about some of her success. In large part, she's had a secret weapon for most of those 30 years in Hazel McCallion. But they also had some other things. You know, you really didn't start with much. There was lots of real estate in Mississauga, but there was a focus on attracting the sector, and they came in spades. I'm glad to see that you're continuing on in that role. Next is Dane Bedward, who has a very interesting CV, and I understand all their CVs, Jason, are in the binders. Dane has had a very illustrious career in the sector, and he's currently an entrepreneur in residence with Invest Ottawa. And many of you may not know, but Invest Ottawa has been a very, very successful model, and we'll look forward to hearing about that. If you take a look at his CV, you're going to find someone who's had vast experience working in this sector here and abroad. So we're pleased, Dane, that you could join us this morning. And finally, but not least, is Daniel. He's Vice President North America at Nanos Research, and I think everybody knows who Nanos is. It's probably one of the most important research firms in our country. So with that, what I'm going to do is perhaps call on each of you to describe in 3 or 4 minutes what in your region have been the ingredients to make you successful, and perhaps throw out one idea that you think either if we moved a roadblock out of the way or put some type of enabler in place, we could fundamentally strengthen what you're already doing. And that might be a way for the audience to understand what the secret ingredients to your sauce are. Then I'd like to start going into a conversation about how do we replicate that in other regions. And heaven forbid if we actually collaborated and figured out how we might raise the water table for everybody, we could raise a few more boats. So perhaps what I'll do is just start here on my left and go through that.
Great. So my name's Justin Leushner. I work at Tech Alliance. It's a regional innovation center. We get in the last year, we've had about 250 companies or people or ideas come through our intake form, and 25% of those companies or individuals are in the life sciences sector. So we do see a lot of companies and technologies, especially because of our close proximity and relationships with the hospitals and with the universities in London. And what I thought, just to spark the conversation, is I just wrote out an email to some of my life science colleagues and asked them, what are we doing well? what are we not doing well, and what can we improve on? So these are people who have different jobs and roles in the life science sector in London. So I figured I'd just read out some of their comments, and maybe that will give you an idea what's going on in London. And maybe it's common across other regions as well. So the good, I had someone write that we have this contest called Proteus that we've just launched in the city, and you can learn more about it. Ask me about it afterwards. But the great thing about it is it provides a tangible product to move forward. So the contest is around technologies that already exist in our tech transfer office that we're trying to form teams around to start commercializing them. It's great to get younger entrepreneurs exposed to the continuum of life sciences, research, technology transfer, business planning, research, developing a pitch, and fundraising. So in a supportive environment with a really good mentorship backing in our region. What's lacking, and I won't go through everything here, but sometimes we get a bad rep in life sciences just because of the time frames it takes to get products to market. So in the London area, we've had successes, but I don't think we do a very good job of touting them, promoting them. So we're a very quiet group, and a lot of it comes from the fact that a lot of life science technologies are not consumer facing. So we've had good success, but we're not doing a good job of promoting it. Next, so this person wrote, I'm seeing more and more interdisciplinary work. Silos are slowly disappearing at both the research level and the organizational levels. So that's a good thing. What's hard in London, we have a great university, but as soon as they graduate, they run. They're gone. They're here in Toronto, they're in other cities that may provide more job opportunities, which is unfortunate. So we do need to attract and retain more people, especially in a complex industry like life sciences. I think a big theme that we're seeing locally is trying to understand the global landscape with respect to research, innovation, and commercializing things moving forward. We have a tendency to look inward in London and not look outwardly. So we're trying to get more of a global perspective with our life science companies. This person wrote, we do really well at innovation and collaboration. What we don't do well is incubation and commercialization. We often try to push technologies out into the marketplace when we should be getting technology pulled into from larger organizations, larger companies. And this person wrote, I run a made-in-Canada medical device company, and London is a great place to run the business out of and a great place to live and have a family. Cost of living is great. It's relatively easy access to the rest of the world through Toronto and Detroit. However, all of my business is in the States and Europe. I don't even think of Canada, let alone London. Then this person phoned me this morning and said, I don't want to be completely negative. The new exporters to border states workshop that the Ontario government puts on was extremely important for this person and helped her out tremendously. So that's it. That's my comments, or their comments.
We'll hear some more from you in a moment. Why don't we go to the end, and Daniel, give us some perspective from Nanos.
Sure. With Nanos Research, formally, but really working on an initiative that, and this is the front end, so unlike my colleagues on the panel here, who probably have more concrete examples for you and recommendations, we're working on an initiative through Niagara that's really looking to establish a binational research and innovation corridor, effectively from Buffalo to Hamilton. And the realities that we're trying to deal with is down that way, effectively led by the universities. This would be University of Buffalo, Brock University, and McMaster. The realities that we're dealing with down that way is the fundamental reality is the border. You have a border that can be certainly a liability for the movement of people, movement of ideas. The challenge is to turn that liability into an asset. The other challenges that we're facing, like all other regions and areas that are led by universities, is how to make more effective use of universities' economic development drivers. How do you assist the university and research efforts to become drivers within the economy? And what we're finding as well, and everyone knows this, has been talked about all morning, talent. Talent is really the global challenge. That's the competition for talent is a global competition. How do you attract it and how do you retain it? And the initiative we're working on is effectively to establish a corridor from Buffalo through to Hamilton that will effectively address these issues. In terms of where we're at the moment, the universities have signed an MOU to kind of move down this direction. If you look at that geographic footprint from Buffalo through to Hamilton, if you include Roswell Park Cancer Institute and the 3 universities, you've got about $850 million annually in research spending. There is a great interest from the bodies, from those institutions, as well as the healthcare providers within that footprint, to somehow come up with a better strategy on how to more effectively navigate and push through healthcare, particularly in the life sciences, but within the healthcare sector, new innovations. What we're finding in a very practical sense is that firms in Ontario, it was said this morning, firms in Ontario are having a difficult time penetrating that healthcare marketplace within Ontario. What we're finding is that Ontario firms are actually landing in Western New York, finding opportunities within the healthcare system that's a little bit more accommodating towards innovation, getting their product or service validated, and they're looking not simply to expand into the US, but actually break back into the Ontario marketplace. So what we're looking to talk about, or at least explore, is how we can use a binational region to impact or benefit a wider Ontario economy, meaning that you don't have to go to California to be in the United States. It's just down the road. If Niagara is part of the greater Golden Horseshoe, then Western New York is as well. And you don't need to go very far to actually take advantage of that US marketplace, not simply to enter the US market, but actually to validate yourself and get back into the Ontario market.
It's interesting, very interesting comments. We've been working with a couple of governors just south of the border on a Great Lakes initiative. They're our single largest trading partners. We're so busy chasing around the world for trading partners when they live right across the lake. I want to come back after to this notion because much of what you're doing has been private sector led, community led, or academic institution led. So it hasn't been happening up the street. And again, I don't want to say anything negative or untoward, but over the course of the last probably 5 to 10 years, government up the street has shrunk by nearly 20,000 people, and it's going to continue to shrink. And so the good ideas and the leadership will come from groups like yours, that consortia that you put together to make it happen. Susan.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about my favorite subject, Mississauga. I was going to talk really about what is unique to Mississauga and has worked really well for us. We have a large life sciences community in our city with a strong, knowledgeable talent base. That has been one of the key reasons why companies continue to grow in our area. And we have a supportive alignment of the key stakeholders to support this sector. Today, Mississauga is the second largest life sciences cluster if you count it by employment in Canada. And we've seen, today we have over 390 businesses employing 25,000 people. And it's a very diverse group of companies, including everything from suppliers, diagnostics, medical supplies, medical equipment, digital health, bio, pharma, and nutraceuticals. We've got it all, really, in Mississauga. But by far, one of the reasons that I think as the ingredients to success has been the supportive environment that we have. We've been very purposeful about our work in this sector, and it's more than 15 years ago. We've identified this as a key growth sector for us. And, you know, it's not just Hazel, and you're right, that's one of our secret sauce. But It is also other leaders within our community, including from past and present, Paul Lucas, when he was at GSK, and now I'm so happy he's still with us at LSO, but also other champions such as Dr. Uli Krull from UTM, University of Toronto, Mississauga. The programs that they've come up with to support industry have been well received. For example, the Masters of Biotechnology program has been 12 years now, and most of our companies will say, oh yes, I hire those graduates, and now we've got those graduates hiring new graduates. So those are all really important support for that sector. So, you know, for us, it's about going forward, and how do you develop the supply chains, develop the connections between companies and small companies and large companies so that they can continue to grow. And so if I was thinking of one idea, it's about finding out in more detail what we have. We've just hired a life sciences sector specialist in our office in economic development to work with our companies to really identify where are the barriers to future growth. And I think that that's something that more municipalities, larger regions could work on.
Interesting. I think there's no question that you decided, or a group of people decided, this is now a government initiative in Mississauga, that you were going to create that sector in Mississauga. So it's been 30 plus years in the making, but it did germinate with a thought, an idea, and a vision. We'll come back to what we might be able to do better or differently to segment small, medium, and large enterprise, because I think one of the things we're missing right now is really an appreciation. What do we need to do to keep large enterprise here? And that strategy is significantly different than germinating smaller firms, startups, et cetera. Dane, let's go to you.
So I'm from Ottawa. Ottawa is my hometown. And I'd like to say that Hazel is definitely one of your biggest assets, or was when she was mayor.
She
I can
still
remember when we, pardon?
She's still out there.
She's still out there for sure, probably playing hockey. But when we moved Genzyme, I used to be first president of Genzyme Corporation, and when we moved it to Mississauga, she was there for every single event that went on there, to open the offices when we were expanding. And that's the type of support that you need in an area. And I think we have that with Jim Watson in Ottawa. So Ottawa, a lot of people don't know Ottawa that well. So 1.2 million people, we have a GDP of about $46 billion. We have 4 institutes of higher learning. 2 of those are universities, 2 of those are colleges. We have about 10 hospitals in the hospital system. From a research standpoint, we probably have about 20 different research institutes in the Ottawa region, some of them affiliated with the hospitals or with the university or with government and private industry. NRC is there, of course. There are approximately 140 biotech companies, life sciences companies, I should say, in the Ottawa area. And they probably have close to 8,600 employees in those areas. About 50% of the companies are medical device companies. We do have some health IT, and that's really helped by some of the industry that exists there already in the IT industry. The biopharmaceutical industry is not very strong at this point. Back in the 90s, when I was on the Life Sciences Board in Ottawa, we were much stronger in terms of new biopharmaceutical companies, and that's something that we'd like to get back to, but it's a challenge, and it's a challenge everywhere to really get that biopharmaceutical sector going. And I think we might have a better chance with the medical devices because of that convergence between the talent that exists in Ottawa from a health IT standpoint, from an IT standpoint in general. We have about 700 companies in the IT sector that can help out. And I'm seeing, as a person responsible in Invest Ottawa for the life sciences companies, I have about 14 different companies that I see on a regular basis, at least once a week, and have discussions with. And these are companies in various stages, most of them in a very early stage, and looking for seed financing. They have raised some money, friends and family. They have raised some more money through angels. And that's one of the difficulties that everybody's been talking about in terms of raising capital, and that's definitely a difficulty when you're dealing with a population of $1.2 million, trying to get that capital that's required. So we identify that just as everybody else in this room, even in Toronto, and identifies this. I spent 16 years in Boston, and raising capital really wasn't a big problem in Boston, but it's a different ecosystem. And I think that's the key. The key is creating an ecosystem. And in the ecosystem, and we've talked a lot about this today, the ecosystem is composed of a lot of different players. And it's really getting all those stakeholders to start working together. I believe through Invest Ottawa has sort of an umbrella in terms of supporting the total investment in Ottawa and bringing companies of all types to Ottawa. I've been focusing mainly on the life sciences companies, and I think we're having some success. We've created a group, and they're a diverse group of CEOs, people from government, people from the hospitals, from the research, and we meet on a quarterly basis, and we're formulating a strategy for the Ottawa region, a strategy that will pull all of these stakeholders together. We don't think it's going to be very difficult. I do some work with Ottawa U. I'm on the board at Ottawa U. And you can see in all of the universities this entrepreneurial push. And you can feel it pushing it down to the students and now into the faculty as well. So I don't think from that perspective, in terms of the ecosystem, that we're going to have a lot of difficulty. We're seeing a lot of cooperation. We have some companies some substantial companies that have come out, not a lot by Toronto standards, but we do have DNA Genotech that came out of Ottawa. We have eSite that came out of Ottawa. They might have relocated recently and had more of a commercial center here in Toronto. So we've had some successes there, and there are more successes to come. Our secret sauce, I think at this point, once we get over that financing, and I think we're going to get there, and the reason why I think we're going to get there is that we're not only going to rely on the angel groups that exist in Ottawa, we are actually going to start a very active approach to some of the other high net worth individuals in the region. And I think to be successful in the overall medical device area will not be a problem for us because we already have that talent pool. What we're lacking would be more talent from a commercialization standpoint and more talent that knows how to raise money, because you can't raise money only in one location. You have to be open to across Canada into the United States on a global basis.
Good, thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and what I'd like to do is start teeing up some questions from the audience. Keeping in mind, I think outcome or success for us today is what can we do better, differently, more of, to fundamentally strengthen the fabric across the province. So you made mention of California. On a consolidated basis, all of Canada is not as big as that market. So it strikes that it might be in our collective interest to figure out how we can bring these regions together, start to break down the barriers of our competing against each other. I think we've been so used to competing against each other as regions, and I can tell a story when I worked in this sector and I was working for one of the companies in Mississauga, and I was on the board of the first RIC, Regional Innovation Center, and they thought that they were competing with Mars. And I tried to describe to them that you're not competing with Mars. When foreign investment is looking to invest here, a Glaxo or a Roche or somebody like that, they don't see Toronto, they don't see Mississauga or Ottawa or Peterborough, they see Canada. In fact, more often than not, when you look into Europe, they see Montreal first, which is maybe hard for some of us Torontonians to believe. But here is our opportunity when they look, if we could connect the work that's going on in London with work that might be happening in Ottawa with a small company in Mississauga, all of a sudden now you're creating a much bigger ecosystem than one that would be just in London, Mississauga, or Ottawa. In your experience, have you had any success working across regions? And if so, why did that happen? How did it happen? And what could we do to fundamentally strengthen that? I really do believe that if we can't figure out how to cross-pollinate and strengthen the fabric across not just the province but the country, then we're not going to build California. We're not going to build the ecosystem that you've just so well described as the critical key success factor to scale. Any thoughts or experience from any of you on that? Susan?
I can just give some examples of not just, I mean, we always have to focus our effort on promoting Canada, Ontario, the Greater Toronto Area, and then Mississauga. I mean, there's no question. We have to be strong in all those areas, and we have to be collaborative in our approach. So we've had lots of examples where we've worked with our federal counterparts, our provincial counterparts, our industry, and we've had to do just that. And so I think more of that type of collaboration, and that the notion of not just doing it as a reaction to something, but being more proactive about it, and making sure that we have almost a team in place that can, when there's an issue, when there's an opportunity, and work on that together. I think that it would be a great step forward for this sector.
Justin?
Well, we suffer a lot because no one knows where London is. You even mentioned it yourself, the Toronto-Waterloo corridor.
Yeah.
Not London.
Yeah.
And Windsor certainly wasn't mentioned in
Geez,
that
I'm
either.
going to correct that starting today.
So, and Ottawa, and Mississauga, goes on and on. What we've done, there's a number of different things that we're doing, and we've been to the Buffalo Niagara Medical Center as well, and are helping companies with soft launches there, and they're very helpful there. They want people to show up. I'm assuming last winter didn't help them for attracting people. The other thing that we're doing, access to capital is always something that we talk about regionally. And if, raising money in Toronto is hard, London, Ontario is very hard. But we've tied into this global network of angels called the Keiretsu Forum, if people are familiar with that. So now the Central Canada chapter, when they do their pitches, they come through town monthly with companies from all over the world. And the interesting thing that this has allowed us to do is, first of all, there's access to capital, get our local high net worth angel investors in a room to see global companies come in. And what we're finding is that reciprocation starts to occur where we help the company in Silicon Valley, help enter the London market. And if we have a London company that needs help in Silicon Valley, they've made that connection, that partnership, that friendship. So now we're starting to find these connections globally and starting to lift our heads up a little bit and realize that we are competing globally, not regionally. So we can help each other. We can help people in Waterloo. We can help people at Mars, because we've got more time than some of you here, I think, have. Anyways,
Others?
some thoughts.
Dane?
Yes, Keiretsu definitely is very helpful. I've had one of my companies, they've been given the big hug by Keiretsu, so they took them to California, they took them on down to southwestern Ontario. So I think getting more angel groups like that are looking at these companies, at the intellectual property that they have, and wanting to take them on an international basis, more angels that are interested from that perspective will definitely help. And I know our angel group in Ottawa is very interested in learning about the life sciences. Many of them are IT, but they're interested in life sciences because they see some upside. It's just the long lead times that bother them. In terms of collaborating, I think that between Ottawa and Toronto, we've seen a lot of collaboration. Definitely, we rely on Mars quite a bit for our help for information about marketplaces. I've seen a company that I used to work with that has moved because they had grown and they needed to get into commercialization, moved to Toronto, and now they're with Mars. So, you know, passing on companies, that's possible. So as long as we're collaborating, we can just do the best thing that's the thing that's in the best interest of the companies. Because we want, yes, our region to be strong, but I think if we can generate strong companies that can grow and even grow outside of the regions, then that will be helpful as well.
So that's insightful, and we might come back to that piece we were chatting at the table earlier about, you know, an organization or a company becoming successful. The people from that experience go out and create other companies or work in institutions and do other things. Paul Lucas and I were chatting about how many people are probably in this room from GlaxoSmithKline. The company trained people well and moved them on. Daniel, you've had an experience where you've been working with a consortium of sorts, but even across the border. So what have been the ingredients for that collaboration? And maybe not so much what inspired it, but what allowed the trust and the relationship to build?
Well, I think self-interest.
Enlightened self-interest, okay.
I think no matter what, in terms of collaboration, it's always good to say, well, we need to collaborate, but everyone comes to the table with an interest, and typically it's a self-interest to benefit their strategies, their agendas. And clearly, in the Western New York environment, they're certainly looking to reach out and become a global player. They view their proximity to the border as actually a great advantage. The old environment, the old economy of industry and manufacturing, particularly in Western New York, tended to look constantly to Albany and to Washington for all kinds of subsidies. There's a great deal of growth that's taken place in Buffalo and in Western New York, and they're reorienting how they're looking. Clearly, they're looking in the global market, but they view the border as an advantage. So they're not looking to collaborate across the border necessarily to benefit anybody, but they're looking to take advantage of that geographical location to be able to use it for benefits within the broader context. I have to say just a couple of anecdotes, just because I think those are the best ways to explain things. I was talking to David Crane, David Crane before the conversation up here in the panel, and I explained to Dave what we're doing, and Dave said, well, that's great, but as long as the control stays in Canada, as long as the control stays in Canada. That's typically the reaction. How do you do this without losing control? It's not so much a loss of control. Something that benefits in Buffalo will spill over. And let me just give you a very quick a story of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. Some of you have certainly been there. A number of you haven't. If you haven't, I advise you to go. But where did the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus come from? They're doing tremendous things there. It came from, it was inspired by not being able to commercialize something. And what was the commercialization? Larry Jacobs, doctor, neurologist, developed Avonex, which he couldn't commercialize. It was for multiple sclerosis. Couldn't commercialize it in Western New York. Looked around, couldn't do it. Went to Boston, and it became the foundations for Biogen. And folks in Western New York said, well, we're not going to do this again. Let's figure out how to set up the structure so that we're able to make sure that if somebody develops something, we can commercialize it here and gain those benefits. Now, so they've structured themselves. It's taken a while, I think, 20 years, but they've gotten to that point. Imagine if the next Avonex comes along and you get a Biogen in Western New York. That's of benefit to Niagara. That's of benefit to Hamilton. That's certainly of benefit to the Golden Horseshoe. So getting an asset and a benefit within Western New York is not at our expense. It actually will be of benefit to us. So whether that's a Canadian technology or something developed within the U.S. or globally that lands within that context, that's always a good thing. So it's not a zero-sum game is what I'm trying to say.
If anyone has a question from the audience, let me know. What can we do to build on these experiences? if we had the next 24 months, what one thing could we do to remove an obstacle or put an enabler in place for at least these 3 or 4 regions to work together? If you could do one thing, what would it be? First of all, do you see the benefit?
There's certainly benefit. I think it's time. I mean, devoting time to actually meet in person, go to Mississauga, go to these regions. I found it extremely useful going to Hamilton and taking a tour to Buffalo with the group there to learn what's going on in Buffalo that we just heard a lot about. That's very inspirational. The great thing that does is it breaks down barriers because it's almost like getting it from a third party. So all these people who are politically charged, maybe locally in our region, when we can point to another region and say, look, they're doing so much better than us. We better start working on this locally. And it does break down barriers and get people working together to help each other out. And the other thing too, working with other regions and meeting in person and understanding what everyone's doing so we're not duplicating effort.
And building on it. It's always interesting to see when you go and visit something or see someone else doing or playing something that you say, we can do that too. Others? Dane?
I would agree. And when I returned to Canada, a colleague was nice enough to take me on a tour of Waterloo and Kitchener. I used to live in the Kitchener area, and I was amazed at what has happened with Innovatech, I think is here. And just how that has transformed Kitchener-Waterloo. And really that came out of, I think it was a bunch of high net worth individuals that initially threw in some money and they decided they were going to make it happen. And I think that's important. We have to have more of those people that are willing to take that risk in order to build businesses. Not only their businesses, but to build an ecosystem in which businesses can thrive. Ottawa, we're in Invest Ottawa right now. We're going to be expanding to a facility similar to that within a short space of time. But that connection that we've already established is very important. And meeting, I don't think that we meet on a regular basis, and that would make a big difference.
It's interesting how powerful the relationship is and being able to pick up the phone and call somebody, but
Yes.
that takes energy, effort, without question, but it's huge. Susan?
Just a really simple thing. In Mississauga, we prepared a map of our businesses, and it's quite amazing to put that in front of a potential company or a company that's in your area to say, wow, I didn't realize how large it was. I don't think we do that consistently in Ontario. We need to really develop that map because it is powerful when you start talking about it and then you start understanding what these companies are doing. I think that in itself would be huge to move a strategy forward.
I have a question over here.
Question to Daniel. I just wanted to get more clarification. Now, I worked with a company that was a part of this year's 43 North. And for people in the audience, the governor of New York put forward $1 billion to energize Buffalo about 3 years ago. And of the 6 strategies, one was, as you mentioned, the biotech. But the second strategy is the world's largest competitive entrepreneurial competition. And I was flabbergasted the serious money that was put forward. First prize, $1 million, right through to 11th place was $250,000. In the last competition, unfortunately, we were semifinalists, we didn't win, but I went down to the finalists and I was surprised and impressed with the enthusiasm and the spirit of Buffalo. There were, of the 11 companies, 3 were Canadian. And those 3 Canadian companies are now moving to Buffalo. So that sort of hit the chord. I said, do you still, if they're placed in Buffalo and they reside in Buffalo and grow in Buffalo, do you still see a benefit for your region? Yes.
Yes, personally I do. I think that there is a benefit. It may not be right immediate, but it certainly will be. One of those companies is actually not headquartered, but located in both countries. So They have to get into Buffalo to be able to validate their product within the healthcare space, and literally they are making their way back into Ontario. I spent time with one of them, really unnamed at the moment, but we're setting up a meeting with the Niagara Health System. And I was shocked after we came out of that meeting. He said, 18 months ago I couldn't get this meeting. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I couldn't get this meeting because I wasn't validated within the United States. And this is typically the experience we're having. This is the company saying this. And he said, I've got 50 companies, colleagues within the GTA that have the same experience. So they're looking at us to see what we can do. Now, it doesn't mean that the company is necessarily going to leave Canada. They're not looking to move to Philadelphia or to go to Baltimore or some other place. They're looking to actually locate, to operate, but they're looking at a global market, certainly a North American market, if not a global market. So I think the concern about a company leaving and then you've lost that company for good, I think that gets back to this whole notion of regional competitiveness. One has to look within the larger context. I can tell you within that corridor space, if that company grows, of those 3 Canadian firms that are there now, if they grow, there will be talent that will be required from the Canadian side to be operating there. So there's tax benefits, there's other kinds of spin-offs that will come from this. So we're agnostic as to where they're located, to be quite honest. In our space, in the broader context for an Ontario strategy, that might be something to look at, but we'll feel the benefits of it at the closer proximity you are to the border. So is there a concern that we would be losing to the U.S.? One might feel that, but if you're unable to break into the marketplace within Canada, where else you're going to go? It's better to have them in Western New York than further afield, because really that is still part of the greater Golden Horseshoe. And I think getting our heads wrapped around that is one of the real challenges.
Dane, you had, both of you, Dane and
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem for companies to have another office in the United States, and a lot of companies are looking at that as a strategy in order to get access to capital. Exactly. They might keep their manufacturing and their research in Canada. They might keep their head office here, but they might establish another office in the United States. And I think to a certain extent that's smart, because in this industry, if you're only thinking Canada, if you're not thinking global, you're going to die. Right. So I think that's my thought there.
Anybody from Buffalo here?
No, we asked if there were...
No one's from Buffalo, okay. So we had a company.
That's a bit like saying, is there any press in the room?
One of the medical device companies that I had mentioned when I was reading out what people were commenting on. So a London-based company, sells in the States and Europe. Went through the same contest, was a semi-finalist. We had a really hard conversation because this person thought she might win. And that meant moving to Buffalo. So she's like, well, I'm going to keep my company in London. Now that I think about it, it's a 1-year term that you have to live there. That's it. And I'm going to send Kevin. I'm not going. To your point about losing companies, we'll take the Buffalo money, we'll take the access to the market, but I still think that there's mutual benefit for Canadian companies to access these places. And the one thing I will say, I've heard Buffalo mentioned more, like in the last 45 minutes, than I've ever heard Buffalo mentioned, except for when the Bills are winning, but that was like 20 years ago. But Buffalo's done a really good job of saying, we're gonna do something. They got everybody together and made it inspirational. The place is incredible, but it's amazing what you can do with billions of dollars. So.
Did we get Kevin back out of Buffalo yet? Andrew.
Thank you. This question is actually a general question, which probably goes into some of the other sections that we've had today. It relates to something that R.A. Dickey actually said during the playoffs. He said, it's amazing what you can accomplish as a team when you don't really care who takes the credit. And I think that's something that we see, this sort of competitiveness aspect from regions, and Allan's earlier comment about the fact that the global world actually sees technology as Canadian as opposed to originating in a specific geography or within a specific building.
Any thoughts? I think that's been underscored a few times.
Yeah.
We have 4 or 5 minutes left. I'll take one more question here. And then perhaps we can just in summary only, that one aha that you want to take away for either yourself or for the collective group here today. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's not so much a question. I just wanted to reinforce an idea that's come up, and that is we've talked all morning and even yesterday about the challenges of access to capital by Canadian firms. Well, you know, there's lots of capital on the other side. In fact, you know what Daniel is doing, and everybody's talked about here, one of the things I think we should be doing, we're doing this, but we should be doing it much more, is helping the companies here how to access capital down there. And let's not get worried about whether they're going to move or not, but if we help them correctly, they won't move. And you know, I'm involved in a couple of those situations where the capital is there. So one thing we should be thinking about overall is how do we help companies access that huge pool of capital there? And I agree, Western New York is just across the border.
Thank you. You want to comment?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dane.
I would definitely agree with that. And I think we have sent companies to California, and we actually have a regular jaunt to California with companies. There's a C100, which is a group of Canadian companies down there that are willing to help. And these are senior executives in some of the largest corporations in the California area, in the world, actually. We also, you can get through the consulates in Boston. We use the consulate in Boston quite a bit. I've had a lot of interaction with them. They have programs in the consulate in Boston, in California, to help companies to go down there for maybe 3 months if they win this competition that they have, and they get the opportunity to meet with some investors and other key people that might be able to help them with their business. So definitely, yes, encourage them to go down there, realizing that they can do all they need to do from here. Most of these places that they need to go to, from Ottawa, it's an hour to get to Boston and to New York and a lot of places that can help out.
Susan?
Yeah, I was just going to say that no matter how big the company is, when we work with them, we're looking for solutions for them. And so wherever those solutions are is going to be important. So it's not really about the competition. It's about how do you make sure that companies that are in your area will continue to thrive. And that's what I think, you know, whether you're looking for money or you're looking for government programs or other things, we're really the facilitator in that business.
That's good. Final question from the audience here.
It's a quick question. Thank you very much. I'm from Boston. I'm with Change Innovation, so I certainly have my biases. But I hear over and over again, capital, access to capital. What I'm not hearing is, you know, what does the government, municipal government, local government, in Ottawa, for example, then you're right there where the federal government is, you know, what role do they play? I get the impression you've given up. You know, it's all about angels. Am I wrong, or?
No, we haven't given up. And I guess the government does have programs to help companies in the initial stages, but these programs will not supply them the amount of capital that they would require. On a life sciences basis, you're looking at $10, $20 million or more, definitely. But so the government will have funding that will help you out maybe to $1 million or so, depending on the programs that you can get access to. And generally, to get access to that amount of money, you'll have to have matching funds, so that would come from high net worth individuals. The VC community has not been very strong lately from a life sciences standpoint, and we're hoping to change that around. That's not very easy to do.
Yeah.
Maybe you have some ideas, but does that answer your question?
Sort of.
It does in some ways. We could talk a little bit more about the notion of having matching funds. I think that is really, I'm not too sure how many of government grants programs do have industry matching grants. I mean, here's, I think, a situation where the industry gets an incentive to invest into areas, ventures, projects that are of strategic interest to them. And now perhaps you can convince the government that we need that 10, 20, whatever million it is. I don't know if I'm being unrealistic here, but I think about what goes on.
So perhaps subject to another forum topic, a little bit more granular in and of itself, an important one, just in the spirit of time, because I could be let go from my duties here if I don't bring this to a close. Any one final comment from any of the panelists, keeping in mind really what I think LSO is trying to achieve is to fundamentally strengthen the fabric across the province, get people working more collaboratively together to strengthen our position here. Final comments?
I think just continuing to visit one another, talk with one another, collaborate. I think we have a challenge together that we can do together, and that's let's outdo Buffalo. And let's get government involvement and industry involvement, both, coming together to do something cool. I mean, Mars is an inspirational building. We just need to grow on it and connect the other regions into the hub.
Huge government investment here.
Yeah.
Susan.
Well, I think government can support, but I think it has to be business-led, and those champions have to come from the business community. And you know, that keeps coming back to us in many of the things that we're doing in Mississauga. This morning I was at a mayor's task force, and I'm happy to say that Mayor Crombie is picked up the torch from Hazel McCallion and understands the value of the business community being leaders in this and champions for progress in all sectors, but life sciences, the knowledge sector, and that's where the success will have to come, at least be led from.
Okay, thank you. Dane, final?
I think basically more communication between our regions would be important. I think there is communication already. To improve upon that would make a big difference. I think that's
good. Daniel?
Yeah.
It's not a competition against the other. We're finding that we're in a binational region, so this is always a natural kind of disposition. But one of the things that we're working on that I think might be able to translate in the provincial context, for us, talent is the key thing. We heard it earlier today. Money will follow talent. They're investing not in regions, not in jurisdictions. They're investing in people, and they're investing in capabilities and research. And so what we're looking to do, if you think of the old, we're in a region that's coming out of the old economy, manufacturing and industry. If you're looking at talent as being the key driver, if you think in the old manufacturing economy, foreign trade zones, these are places that are typically in port cities or at the border where goods come in at duty free. You kind of add value when you send them out at a reduced duty rate. We're looking to cultivate that corridor as a free talent zone or a foreign talent zone, because talent is the driver in the new economy. So how do we do that? Trying to reduce the barriers of that border so that people can actually move around within that corridor. If that can translate and help within a larger Ontario context, certainly maybe those ideas can help out there.
That's great. Well, thank you. I think the one common thread that you see in this conversation is people. People make stuff happen. Leadership will come from yourselves and groups like Life Sciences Ontario. So, Jason, thanks for all that you're doing. And to our panelists this afternoon, thanks for taking time to be here.